And now, our feature presentation.
I like it spooky.
Hey everybody, welcome to the I Like It Spooky Horror Podcast. I'm Brian.
I'm Jason.
I'm Clint, and throughout the entirety of this show, I will be referring to our Brian here as Spooky Brian, because here in just a bit, we will be joined by writer, Godzilla expert, and unique cinema connoisseur, Bryan Clark. But first, let's get to the news.
So I got some kind of exciting news here. I mean, exciting to me. Nobody else will probably care, but I'm still going to talk about it because, it's our show. So,
Halloween.
I wish I had some Halloween news, but no, nothing right now. But
Code Orange.
Ghoulies. Ghoulies is getting released to 4K physical media in September. September 12th, a brand new restoration of Ghoulies. I'm excited for this. I mean, just, it goes right back to your childhood. Like I said, brand new restoration, Dolby Vision with it, a lot of interviews, special features. I don't know if any of these were on previous releases, but it'll be kind of fun just to see anyway and explore all that. Comes with a 4K laser vision mini poster.
Ooh.
Also, Ghoulies 2 will be released that day, but just in Blu-ray. They're not doing the whole 4K treatment for that. Kind of get a new release on the Ghoulies 2 pack right before Halloween. Depending on the price, I'm interested in picking this up.
I love the first Ghoulies. It's got some real stark imagery. Yeah, when you get into part 2, 3, and I think there was a 4 maybe, I got to that kind of silly popcorn cinema type stuff. But, the first one's fantastic.
Yeah, I'm excited for that. I'll check them out, hopefully, unless they're like, $40.
Does it say who's releasing it?
MVD distribution. I've heard of them. I think that's the MGM group doing it, but there's a lot of MVD releases. So nope, not like a Scream or Terror Vision or a Scream Factory, anything like that. Just MGM's own distribution.
I was hoping you were going to say Vestron, and I was like, their stuff's really affordable. I'll buy it all from Vestron.
I would have loved it because, they're always come out at a great price point.
So Ghoulies 1 and 2, 4K and DVD. Or Blu-ray, DVD.
Blu-ray.
Shit.
Yep.
I say DVD. I've been talking to my friends all week, and they're like, you buy any DVDs lately? I'm like, who the hell still buys DVDs? And then a friend, Rod Hutchinson, works at Walmart, and he's like, 70% of Walmart's physical media sales are DVD. Shit. Still?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
I think it's still the number one media that is sold. Well, and looking at this, I just went ahead and looked it up. Amazon has Ghoulies for $33 for the 4K. Kind of prices me out of it, but I'm sure it's going to drop in price pretty quick after that. So I'll still be able to get it.
If you special order it or if you pre-order it and the price drops, you get that money back.
They'll match that. Yep.
I bought that Arrow box set for $100, and then it was like $70 a couple weeks later, so I got $30 back.
Well, yeah, score.
I'm still waiting on it. It's been pushed back a couple times. People that went to Texas Frightmare got it.
Oh, I was about to say I've seen it.
Yeah, they have it. Yeah, they just haven't sent it to anybody. Yeah, it's not shipped to anybody that I saw. My news, exciting to me because I will be there. They announced the first guest at the World Drive-In Jamboree in Vegas in October 6th, 7th, and 8th. And it sounds like Saturday night, legendary director, producer, distributor, writer, and mentor to dozens of Hollywood stars, Roger Corman's going to be there. My guess is we'll get 2 Roger Corman movies for the Saturday night viewings. They don't announce the movies. It's kind of like the show. They surprise you. It's going to be hot as shit, though, and Roger's old. So I hope they have like a tent or a trailer set up. Like you go in and you meet him and you can get autographed, maybe a picture with him, because on Saturday they have bands, celebrities, vendors. You get autographs and pictures. And sounds like it's also going to be a special episode of the show. So I know they recorded last year's Jamboree, but they've not released it. It was supposed to be like an episode of the show, but it never came out. So hopefully this year's different, that they record it and release it. And maybe you'll see my ugly face on TV. I'll probably cut that part out, but yeah.
In Vegas, does it get cooler when the sun goes down? I'm sure it does, but I wonder like how much it drops.
I think it's extreme, like it's 80 in the day and then the sun goes down and it's like 50. So you'll have to like have a jacket at night.
I think it's more than 80 in the day. But again, you run into that argument of the dry heat versus the humidity that we deal with in the Midwest. So, it's hot, but I don't think it's too bad.
Yeah, I hope in October it's not like 100. I'm hoping more like 80s in October. Yeah, but there's a lot of people camping out, and I'm just like, they got big ass spiders and scorpions and all kinds of shit and camping. I'll be tired. I want to sleep. If I sleep, you want to sleep in a bed, right? I mean, if you had a camper, yeah.
I forget the rating you gave Kingdom of the Spiders, and we covered that a few episodes back, but I think it was a pretty favorable rating. So the spiders they'll probably leave you alone.
I think it was like a 7 or so. Comfort movie.
They'll be cool with you.
Yeah, the scorpions won't be, or the snakes, the people.
Or the people.
If you're at this big festival and all these people are sleeping outside, it's going to be noisy. Would you be able to sleep? I mean, it's right by the airport. And it kind of prices me out. You would have to pay for every night to sleep there. And I'd have to buy a tent and sleep because I'm not going to take that on the flight. I'd have to leave it all there. I'll be in a hotel at a casino. Hopefully they have a good buffet. What kind of news you got, Clint? Any buffet news?
No buffet news.
Damn it.
So my news comes from Dread Central. This story actually hit my radar a couple of weeks ago. I've been wanting to talk about it on Spill the Guts, but I saved it for here. It is Jason's favorite actor, Richard Brake. Just kind of digging at Jason. If you remember a while back, we covered The Munsters, and he was like, I don't know if I like Richard Brake in that. And I was like, dude, that guy's intense. I'm going to fucking tell him when we see him at a convention. He's going to kick your ass. So he's got a movie coming out called The Gates. This is a new film, and it's one hell of a way to make a feature debut directed by Stephen Hall. Basically what's going on here is he is a serial killer, and he is conducting like this ritual to bring back his deceased wife. And as he's doing like the last sacrifice or whatever, he gets interrupted by the police. He gets sentenced to death in the electric chair. And this is a period piece also. It takes place in London in the 1890s. Trailer out for it. So when I first read this, when I first heard of this, I thought of like Wes Craven Shocker. I thought of, I think it was called The Last Horror Show. It was supposed to be House 3. The Sandman from the 90s came to mind. And so I thought it was going to be kind of comic booky, cartoony. But I tell you what, I watched the trailer and it's very serious, melodramatic. The lighting looks great. It's shot well. It looks pretty vicious. And Richard Brake just looks amazing as this crazed serial killer. So that's my news. I don't see a release date or anything yet. Check it out on YouTube, The Gates, and you can watch an exclusive clip. And then hopefully we can watch this in its entirety soon.
You said a period piece, huh? 1700s? 1800s.
Yeah, 1890s. London in the 1890s. When was Jack the Ripper?
The later 1800s, like 1870s, 1880s.
Between August and November of 1888, so probably not. I didn't read anything in the article from Dread Central about it being tied in with Jack the Ripper, but that'd be an interesting little twist.
And if they do it well, you and I kind of talked about these comfort movies. If they do it well and they do the period piece well, those are kind of becoming comfort movies as I age, just because you can see the stylized look of the movie and take in some history. And it's just soothing for some odd reason, even though people are being massacred and this guy's sitting in the electric chair.
Right.
You get all this beautiful film work and all this stunning visuals. And yeah, if I got to watch 5 minutes of some guy getting shot to death, I don't think they'd draw it out that long.
I kind of left out this part. It's probably an important part. In his final hours, he puts a curse on the prison and all who's in it. And just based off the artwork of, like the poster of the film, kind of looks like he gets sentenced to death and then comes back and it turns into a supernatural film and he starts taking everybody out. And then actually, I'm reading further into the article. It does. I have a release date. It comes to digital and video on demand on June 27th. So yeah, we get to see this soon.
Well, definitely worth checking out.
So it looks like Richard Brake's going to get shocked to death. You know what else is shocking? The lack of money that's in my wallet because I actually bought some stuff this time. How about you guys? Why are we so poor?
So now that we've heard the news on this special installment of Why Are We Poor, we have a guest. Bryan Clark is going to tell us all about all the Godzilla shit he's bought. Right, Bryan?
Yeah, well, one of the things, I'm poor for several reasons. Severin Films, who I know Brian's a big fan of, recently released a box set of Emmanuel movies. Like all of the Laura Gemser Emanuelle movies, 22 movies in this massive bundle. And there was one, of course, that they always have extra bits and pieces and add-on things you can get. Well, they had one that had special pen from the hotel in Singapore that Emmanuel stays at in one of the movies, a Severin Airlines carry-on tote bag, some pins, some stickers, some other things, and a full-blown goddamn Emmanuel tabletop board game. And because I'm a huge fan of Laura Gemser's Emmanuel movies, I had to get the whole big bundle with the board game. And then Umbrella Films, an Australian label, released on 4K one of my absolute favorite movies of all time, Razorback, in a special edition bundle yet again, god damn it, with a reprinting of the original novel that the film was based on with expanded pages of behind-the-scenes photos and anecdotes, a t-shirt, a reproduction movie poster, and a little action figure of the pig, like a little reaction Super 7 style pig figure. And because I'm a sucker for all of these special extras, of course I had to buy all that too. But the biggest reason I am poor, yes, does involve Godzilla, and I have it right here beside me. So there is a company called Passion Tank that makes high-end Godzilla called Sofubi, soft vinyl figures, and I managed to get a hold of a glow-in-the-dark blank one. Now, they make very limited runs of all of their colors, so they're hard to get, but I snagged one off Yahoo Japan auctions for a reasonable price, and I sent it off to a guy who does custom toy paint jobs. So this is my one-of-one Passion Tank Shin Godzilla custom painted. I know the listeners can't see it, and my camera isn't very good to show you guys all the colors. It's extremely vibrant and colorful, and it glows in the dark, and it's huge. Orange fins, kind of a bluish black body, so it's sort of a Halloween Godzilla.
Does the whole thing glow or just the little white part?
Well, now mostly just the little white parts. It was originally just a solid white figure. So all of this color was airbrushed on by this guy. And I just told him to, here's the figure. I trust you. I like your style. I like what you do. Go nuts. So basically doubled the cost of this damn thing by having this guy paint it. It's absolutely worth it. It is.
I wonder if having it painted would diminish the value just because it's not original, but it looks absolutely fucking amazing.
Oh yeah, this isn't some a kid sitting in his garage with a paintbrush kit. This is like, this dude does pro level work. It's amazing. It looks better than not most. It looks better than all of the standard production run Godzilla figures in my collection. So yeah, this is the crown jewel for sure. But the value, I mean, I'm not getting rid of this thing. It's the only one of its kind that looks like this in existence. So it's not getting resold.
It'd look a lot cooler in a display box. I'm just kidding. If you listen to the show, I'm all about boxes.
Well, it didn't come in a box. Oh, I know. No, this it came in a bag with a little cardboard header stapling the bag shut, but it was all in pieces in the bag. So you had to take it out of the bag to assemble the figure in the first place. So it wouldn't display very well if you kept packaged because it would just be a jumble of parts. But I do have a big glass china cabinet, like a 7-foot tall glass fronted cabinet in my living room that I display most of my Godzilla stuff in. It is displayed in a box, technically, I suppose.
Beautiful, beautiful. Does that glass china cabinet have a lock on it?
No, but my kids are old enough to not mess with that stuff, and the dog can't figure out how to get it open. So,
well, no, I'm just trying to figure out. I'm trying to figure out if it's locked up or not. I'm not the biggest Godzilla fan, but Bryan Clark, what's your address?
No.
Oh, damn! I tried.
Well, I feel like a lot of people outside of the Super Godzilla fans are not going to know who Shin Godzilla is, so that wouldn't be the first one they'd go for anyway.
Right.
That would be not like the first figure they grab. They'd grab everything else before that. It'd probably be safe.
Jason, do you have any Godzilla things in your poor list today?
Well, not in my list today, but I do have a Godzilla NECA figure, which I'm sure pales in comparison to that, in price and quality. Good enough for me. So what I got, of course, everything's kind of tied together. It's all John Carpenter related, who we've already kind of talked about earlier. 3 of the things are Halloween related, of course. So I finally got my Fog figure in.
Get the fuck out of here. Halloween related. You?
Yeah, no. Right. Weird. I finally got my Fog figure in.
Yes.
You made me nervous last week by saying, like, you think it might be lost. I'm like, oh, shit. But then it finally showed up, and it's beautiful. I love it. It's amazing. So just a couple things here. I bought a pre-order, and I think it was back January of 2022. Mezco 1/12 scale Michael Myers Halloween 2 figure. I got it from Big Bad Toy Store, and it finally came in and finally shipped to me a year and a half later. Should have been, look, Clint will be proud. It's still in the bag, in the box, so I can't even like really show it to you yet. But I will open it. I have the Halloween 1 version opened up in my cabinet behind me. I will open this eventually. One other thing that I bought was kind of tied to some news that we had some episodes ago, but there's a Halloween 2 Kickstarter game coming out through Stop the Killer.
I was wondering if you spent money on that yet.
What's kind of cool, this is my first time I've done anything with Kickstarter, but I did pre-order this. I don't have it yet, of course, because it's not out yet. You could buy one game for $60 or two for $100. And what was kind of cool is you can change what you buy before they ship it. So I'm thinking about now upping it to the 2 games so I can kind of open one and keep one sealed, make Clint proud, and still get the satisfaction of opening it. That Kickstarter game, it's live right now, so go get in on it. I think there's a little over 2 weeks left, so if you listen to this on release date, there's probably only a few days left, so go check that out. And it has reached all of its stretch goals, so all the added stuff will be added into the game.
Yeah, I think it reached most of them like after it wasn't even 48 hours. There was only a few. And what's cool about Stop the Killer is I did the same thing. I bought 2 with the My Bloody Valentine one, and one I kept so I could have in the collection. The other one I bought so I could open it and play it. And then you can get all the expansion packs and add-ons and stuff. But what's cool about that is, like you said, you can edit your order actually up through the shipping. So like, let's say the campaign ends tomorrow and it's still a month before it ships, which it's actually longer than that. Just for example, you can get in there and change and edit things up to that point too.
Oh, nice. Good to know.
You could with My Bloody Valentine.
That's what I got. Who's next? Brian?
Now we got something to play when I come over in September.
Yes. Oh, hopefully I have it by then. I should have looked to see when it officially comes out, but I think it's right around there.
I'll probably lose. Do we all lose? If we win, that makes the game no fun. Because don't you want Michael to win? I don't know.
When you win or lose, just come meet up with me and Brian. We're going to be, in the back with pigeons.
Stroking pigeons.
Yeah.
So my first thing, I didn't have anything. Like the other day, I was like, shit, I have nothing. My not my vinegar syndrome. My TerraVision movies shipped. So this month they released, I don't even know how to say this, some Korean movie, I believe it is.
Shrigala.
It's a knockoff of Friday the 13th, and it's a foreign film. It sounds fun. And then Cube, which is a Japanese movie. Yeah.
No, that's a Canadian movie. I need to pick. Yeah, I love that movie. Unless it's a different Cube. The one where the people are stuck in the cube prison that keeps reconfiguring itself. That's a different Cube. I'm not familiar with the Japanese one.
Yeah, this is Japanese.
That's cool. I'll have to check that one out too.
1997. Again, another name I can't say, but
maybe a remake or something.
I think it's same premise, but it's Japanese instead of. And then Welcome to Hell, which looks interesting. Death metal, satanistic cult movie.
Now you're speaking my language. I'm definitely gonna have to pick that one up.
Right up my fucking alley. Woo, yeah.
I signed up for another year of movies from TerraVision, so I had to drop $1,000 to get their next 50 releases. But they're just doing a lot of stuff that I had no idea existed. What else did I get? Here, let's see.
Isn't that funny about a new movie will come out like a for example, a Marvel movie or some big studio thing that we all see. We can go to the theater and see it. You really like it, comes out on video, and you're like, I don't know if I need to buy that Blu-ray or not. It's $25, whatever. And then we'll spend piles and piles of money for sight unseen movies we've never heard of before. These special editions with 6 hours of extra features and all this stuff. Oh, it's $35 for the 4K of this horrible movie that was shot on 16 millimeter film in somebody's basement. Sure, I'll spend the money and take a chance on that. It's almost certainly going to be awful and I'll never watch it again, but what the hell.
Someday I'm going to retire from my job and I'm not going to have anything to do but watch movies.
That's a good way to put it. We're saving for the future. That's the excuse I'm going to use from now on.
Brian, listening to your description, I just got to ask, I didn't know that they released Demoniacs on 4K.
Well, not yet, but a UK studio called Indicator has been putting Roland's movies out on 4K, and I've got all 4 of them, so I'm sure they'll get to Demoniacs eventually.
The 4K clown edition. Yeah. So I ordered a Joe Bob cup the other day. They had a new shirt drop, and they had a cup. So I ordered that. Jason has some of these cups from Fright Rags. So I ordered a Joe Bob. And somebody at Fright Rags understood the assignment. There's a Cheddar Goblin sticker, and there's a Halloween 3 card in the box.
That's nice.
Joe Bob and Darcy fight about showing Halloween 3, and he has I don't know that he hates the movie or he just likes to bust her balls, but I was like, that's pretty funny that a Halloween 3 card came with the cup. And here's my last thing. I went to Ghoulish Mortals a couple weeks ago in St. Charles, Illinois. It's a horror themed store. We know them because they vend at Flashback every year. They've been open for 5 years, I think. Cool story. I'm in there, and the lady's like, I'm talking to the lady, and Jack's playing the Godzilla pinball machine. All the pinball machines are free. They have 4 of them, so we're going around the store. We're looking at stuff. We're playing the pinball machines, and the lady's like, do you know who this actor is? He was just in here. I didn't know who he was, and he was kind of surprised. And I'm looking at him, and I'm like, he's in Rob Zombie movies, but I can't think of his name. You know, I'm thinking for a little bit longer. And she's like, he played Herman Munster in the Munsters. And I was like, well, yeah, but he was in makeup. After that, I was like, oh, it's Jeff Daniel Field. And she's like, yeah, he was here. His brother lives in the area. He was visiting. And she's like, you just missed him. He was just here not too long ago. I'm like, son of a bitch. I guess they had talked about maybe some signings or stuff in the future. And I was like, definitely get a hold of us and let us know, because that's only like a 2.5 hour drive for me. And my son lives there. So I would definitely try to get up there for it. I bought Tiffany and Finley a print. Jack bought some prints, and I bought this print, Mothra. So we'll share this on the social medias, but it was just too beautiful to pass up.
Vibrant colors.
Mythica's Monsters. She had some other stuff. She's working on some more Godzilla stuff. So I was like, oh, it gives me something to buy next time. I can buy Ultraman or Godzilla or whoever else she puts out. I think there was a King Ghidorah and a Rodon that she had worked on that I can add to my collection for my next trip to Ghoulish Mortals.
Come down and visit and check this store out. It sounds awesome.
Do they produce those prints themselves, or are they brought in? Or
more than anything, just tons of artwork. Just in sections, like this artist would be this part. And they had Universal Monsters had a whole section, and then like anything Beetlejuice and The Simpsons and cryptids and Friday the 13th. And as you go through, there's all this stuff, and it's just different artists. They had a Halloween pinball in the basement, and they had a bunch of Halloween and serial killer artwork around it you could buy that artists had brought in to sell. And, we've talked about this before. At conventions, I'm going more anymore to see who's got great artwork I can put up, not so much for the celebrities. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to buy this. And Finley's room's kind of becoming the Godzilla poster room. I'm going to put it up in her room because this is Return of the Living Dead and Joe Bob in here.
That's pretty cool, because anymore, a lot of your Halloween horror shops are always fun to visit. Not knocking any of them. I love all of them. But you go and it's your NECA and your Fright Rags, which is all great stuff too. But so it's cool that they're highlighting, different, I don't even say local because they're probably from all over the place, but independent artists. That's awesome.
I don't know that I saw a NECA figure in the place. I mean, it was all like patches and stickers and artwork and little trinkets and just videotapes, like old videotapes that had been refurbished with like movies on it, and just all kinds of odd stuff that you wouldn't find at a Walmart or a Target or something like that in the horror section. So I'll definitely go back. And they were expanding 2 parts of it, so there's more to come. And free pinball. I mean, Jack stood there for like half hour. I'm like, we gotta go. Like, I want to go to the record store. We went down to the record store, and I'll show those on the next one so I don't take up too much time. But I picked up some horror records at that shop. It was a good day.
That Halloween pinball machine from Spooky Pinball Empire or whatever it is was free. I'd still fucking be there. You'd have to be dragging me out.
Yeah, they had Alien, Stranger Things, Halloween, and Godzilla. All free. I was like, how much is this? And she's like, it's on free play. You just play it. Man, I could spend all day here.
I'd wind up having to wash dishes in the back, even though they don't serve food.
They don't, yeah. You can wash pinball machines.
I got a few things to show this time. I've been super duper. I can't buy a damn thing poor lately. This one right here, real quick. I forgot to mention back on Mother's Day, I took the ex-girlfriend and the former bonus daughter and my 2 daughters. We went back to Weirdsville Records. The ex-girlfriend still hangs out with the kids and does stuff for them, and they have a great relationship. So I'm like, hey, it's Mother's Day. We're going to celebrate it. So we went up there, had some lunch, and then stopped at Weirdsville Records. On my dime, everybody bought a record. And then I, for myself, picked up the Twang-O-Matics. I don't know why it was just the cover art and not because there's two nude skull-faced women on the front. I swear that wasn't what did it, but I just dig old kind of psychobilly, sounds like this. So it was like probably the cheapest record that we picked up there. So I grabbed that, came home, pleasantly surprised. It is kind of like if you're listening to the credits at the end of a Quentin Tarantino film, very kind of Pulp Fiction kind of wet sound to it, all instrumental. Yeah, I picked that up. That was kind of fun. Been wanting to talk about that for a while, but I keep forgetting. Was recently at Screamer's Costumes, 25th celebration, 25th anniversary with Art the Clown and Little Pale Girl were there. I went inside the store and they had a bunch of the NECA Bride of Frankensteins that recently came out. So grabbed myself a couple of those. Still, the curse of the NECA Frankenstein accessory pack follows me. They had some, but by the time I got in, they were gone. That's a story within itself. That event was the day before Father's Day. So the day after that, Father's Day, I was gifted this beautiful piece right here. Again, sorry about the glare. So show it on the socials. But this is a sealed Frank Zappa Halloween 81 6-disc costume box set. Contains 3 full shows and 78 unreleased tracks, all from October 31st, November 1st, 1981 at the Palladium in New York. So there's some great music on here. And then it's got kind of a Frank Zappa as Dracula, old school plastic Halloween mask in there. We actually, when we went to Weirdsville Records, I saw that they had them there and I wanted it, but I was spending money on everybody else. So I was like, maybe some other time. I got it for Father's Day. What else? Oh, not a big deal, but we've talked about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre video game coming out. It is on pre-order right now. If you order it now, you can save 10%, so like $4. The game comes out August 18th. I went ahead and dropped the money on that. Cool thing about that is that game, when those games come out, they're usually 70, 80, 60, 70, 80 bucks. This is only like $40, and then you get $4 off. So pre-order now if you want to get it a little bit cheaper. That's it. That's why I'm poor. That's all there is. I'm sad that there's not more. I know how we can maybe get to some more. Maybe if we take it to a sponsor and get some money for the show.
So, you want to visit a haunted house, I think I have one that should suit you. That is, if you dare follow me. Here we are at the door. Happy haunting.
Hey haunters, Clint here from the I Like It Spooky Horror Podcast. As a former haunted attraction owner, I know firsthand how expensive mass advertising can be. If you are looking for an alternative way to advertise directly to your target audience, look no further than the I Like It Spooky Horror Podcast. Simply email us at ilikeitspookypod@gmail.com and we will get back to you with info about our affordable rates. Now that we've heard from our sponsor, we would like to welcome to the Spooky Studio columnist, author, Godzilla expert, and unique cinema connoisseur, Bryan Clark.
That's a unique cinema connoisseur. That's one way to put it. Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Well, we're glad you're here too. I'm not 100% sure if we're glad with the movie that you chose, but we'll get into that in just a little bit.
Uh-oh. Yeah, I wondered about that.
Speaking of that, Bryan, you're going to hang out with us here in just a little bit. Continue to hang out with us and discuss a film that you picked for us to watch. But first, we want our audience to get to know you a little bit if they already don't. And I kind of just want to jump right in with your time at Scream Magazine. So you write for Scream Magazine. Is this a continuing thing, or was it a one shot? Or
no, it's an ongoing thing. I've written for them for a little over 2 years now, I guess. That came about through our mutual friend, Justin Beam, was on Attack of the Killer podcast when I started on that show, or he was coming back for a few guest spots at least. And we got to be friends through that. And he introduced me to the editor, basically started an email thread with me and Rich, the editor, and said, "Hey, this is Bryan, that guy I was telling you about. Okay, bye." And then just deleted himself from the the chain and left us to it. But so I wrote a sample piece on Son of Kong, and they wound up going ahead and publishing that one. And then Rich, the editor, sent me a list of movies that they wanted covered, and I just plowed through all that, and they've got quite a few on deck for me yet. And they publish every other month, so it takes a little while to dig through the slush pile there and get everything. They don't publish in order they get them. So I've got, I don't know, probably another year's worth of articles in the can for them already. But yeah, we're talking about continuing that. I'll probably keep writing for them. It's a lot of fun. It's a good magazine, good environment. Rich is a lot of fun to talk to and a great editor to work with. He's got good suggestions.
With your writing for them, so you said they give you a list. Do they give you a list and then can you pick and choose? Or are you basically like, here, this is what we want you to do it?
So now that I'm through the initial list, which I'm not even sure he expected me to do the entire list, but I did anyway, because like that, I guess. So now we're discussing other movies that I can bring to the table, ideas for articles and things. But yeah, they take pitches and stuff too. It's not just here, this is what we want you to write, now write it. That's how it started off.
Through writing with them, you were able to recently interview John Carpenter, which I'm sure was an amazing experience.
I've done another interview that still hasn't come out for them too, with Nick Maley, the creator of Yoda from The Empire Strikes Back, that we were talking about Life Force with him. For the John Carpenter one, Vampires was just on the list. And I thought, well,
I love that movie.
I do too. It's I think one of his most underappreciated movies. I don't want to say like underseen or anything like that, but like it always kind of gets thrown on the heap with his later not as good, shall we say, stuff, and I don't think it deserves to be there. I think it's fantastic. So I was looking for some quotes and things on it, and again, Justin Beam, I was talking to him, and he goes, "Why don't you just see if you can talk to John?" and sent me his PR guy's email, and I was like, "Yeah, all right, why not?" So everyone's like, "How did you get to interview John Carpenter?" And the answer is, I asked. It was as easy as that. And he was extremely sweet. He's got kind of a reputation for being an old grump at conventions and stuff sometimes. And the interview could have gone better. That is on me. There were some technical difficulties, and I was afraid he was going to get impatient, tell me to kick rocks, basically. But he was very patient through the whole thing. He was really funny, really nice. We wound up, I think, talking about John Wayne and John Ford movies more than we talked about vampires. But it was a cool conversation.
One of the things I like about interviews I've seen with John Carpenter is, yeah, like you say, it's very laid back. I think a lot of us hold him, especially Jason here, hold him up on a pedestal just because of his contribution to cinema. And then whenever I see people talk to him, he's just, talks like a damn sailor, very, very layman, very cool. So speaking of interviewing celebrities, Spooky Bryan here tells me, I don't know if this was an interview, but that you once met, I'm going to screw his name up, but Jorg Bagretti, the director of Necromantic, a film that I think we all love. How did that come about?
Jorg Bootgrit, yeah.
Thank you.
It was of all places in Tokyo. I think I've told this story on Attack of the Killer podcast before, so apologies if I'm repeating myself for some of your listeners. But I ran into him at Godzilla's 65th anniversary celebration in downtown Tokyo. I was there with a group of friends who had all gone for this Godzilla thing, and we were walking around, and this really tall blonde dude comes up to me, assuming he saw a fellow English speaker, and asked me where he could find tickets for a certain thing. And I said, I don't know. I'm sorry, man. So we parted ways. But the whole rest of the day, it was just eating away at the back of my head. Like, who is that guy? God, he looks familiar. And one of my friends who was there with me is also a fellow hardcore horror nerd. So we were walking around together talking about, it's like, I saw this guy and it's bugging me. So we spotted him again, and then it clicked, and I nudged him like, Andrew, look, that's fucking Jorg Bootgrit, the director of Necromantic, here to hang out and look at Godzilla stuff, because he's a huge kaiju nerd too. So he was actually there covering the festivities for, I think he said a German radio station, but he's written several books on kaiju in German. He's basically like the leading German language expert on Godzilla and other kaiju movies.
Speaking of Godzilla, I'm glad that you actually agreed to be on the show after all the...
I know, it was...
They're fun digs, but they could be seen as personal attacks. I'm always ribbing you and ribbing Spooky Bryan about cryptids and Godzilla.
Yeah, well, I had to swallow my pride and my principles and show up here anyway.
Well, we appreciate it, especially with your beautiful radio voice here, gracing us with that.
Oh, thank you.
I want to get to some Godzilla stuff in just a minute, but first, so back to the writing. You recently put out a novel, Putting the Ground to Sleep and Other Weird Tales. Spooky Bryan, he bought one. He can't read. He probably won't read it, but he wanted to support you, and he bought it.
Yeah, I appreciate it.
So tell us a little bit about like that journey from like concept to, throughout and now to publishing.
It's a collection of short stories. 3 of them have been in print and other anthologies. I've a writer. I don't know. I've always been a storyteller, I guess. I remember getting an old typewriter at my grandma's one time, and I'd just sit in front of it and hunt and peck, to type little stories about dinosaurs or whatever. So it's just always been in my brain. So I've got my first story published in 2014, and then it was a few years between that and the next one. Even I'd been writing the whole time. I had all these stories on my hard drive, but the submission process to send something to an anthology editor, wait months and months and months to hear back, if you hear back at all. It's just such an arduous process to get. You could have things that you wrote 10 years ago that still haven't been published yet. And which was the case for me. Some of the stories in this book are good 10 years old at least. And so I finally decided I'm just going to try to self-publish this and see what happens. I want all these stories off my hard drive and out of my brain, so I have a fresh slate to start writing new things, and I can stop trying to find homes for these. So I put it all together. I have a friend up in Minneapolis who runs a great imprint called Weird Punk Books. He does the interior layout formatting as a freelance thing, so I had him do the formatting for me. I reached out to a guy named Jolien Yates, who that name might be familiar to some of you physical media collectors out there. He's done work for Arrow Video. He's done work for Mondo Macabro, doing cover art for Blu-rays and art for the interior materials, the booklet covers and things like that. And he did a fantastic job. I told him I wanted something that looked like a 70s, paperback from hell type thing that you would find digging through the piles in the horror section in a used bookstore. And he just absolutely knocked that out of the park. So I'm really happy with how it turned out, and just self-published it through Amazon. So if you go on Amazon.com, you can find Putting the Ground to Sleep. I have a little author page there. And I always have to point this out because I think it's so goddamn funny. Our friend Tad Good pointed this out to me, that there is another Bryan Clark, also spelled with a Y, who writes gay erotic fiction, who you can find on Amazon as well. So if that's your thing, that's absolutely cool. More power to you. But if you're looking for my stories, that's not the one.
You sure? And you just forgot to give them your stage name. What do they call it? A pseudonym or?
Pseudonym, yeah. Well, honestly, his stories are probably outselling mine by orders of magnitude. So I kind of wish that was me, because he's probably making a living at it.
You said that people can pick that book up at Amazon.com, but I think it's in physical stores in some places also, right?
There are 2 comic book shops here in Mason City, where I'm from, and they are both carrying it. And then there is a store that is just my favorite place in the whole world. It's called Dreamhaven Books and Comics, and that's up in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I'm just going to plug them. I don't work for them, I promise, but if you're ever in Minneapolis, you have to check out Dreamhaven. It's just an amazing store full of all these cool old pieces of memorabilia and horror and sci-fi literature, collectibles. It's a fantastic store. And Greg, the owner, he's super cool. It's a lot of fun there.
I want to touch on something you kind of brought up just a minute ago to maybe hit home to young, inspiring writers. And I agree with you, because I used to write screenplays, and I still do, but I don't really do anything with them. It's very daunting. And so for a young, unpublished writer coming out, and you have all these great ideas you want to get onto paper, you can almost be scared away, because it's like, okay, now what do I do with it? The assumption that you have to have an agent and you have to have connections, and it's kind of like, so it's very hard to get started. But it sounds like if you had a message to young writers, I kind of heard it in what you were saying, to just keep pushing it and just ask and just, get the stuff done.
Yeah, the people who are still out there writing, the ones who just never gave up, don't get discouraged. I was talking to Andrew, the friend who I met Jörg Bucher with in Tokyo. He's in a death metal band, several death metal bands, and he's wanting to break into creative writing. In fact, he just had his first short story published a couple of months ago. I was talking to him about it one night, because he's used to, like, you record a demo, you send it to a label, and usually that process is, at least in the musical channels that he travels in, it's a little more streamlined. He's had a lot of success in it. He was unused to the idea of having to send all of these manuscripts out to all these different publishers and then just sit there and never hear back from them. He's like, this sounds awful. I said, yeah, it is. I don't know why I chose to do this to myself, but writing stories, that's the creative worm that's in my brain. You know, some people it's music, some people it's filmmaking, but whatever it is, it's always in you. It's, you know, people ask what I do. It's like, well, I work in a factory for a living, but that doesn't matter because that's not who I am. I'm a writer, and I always, you know, someday I'll retire from my job. I will probably never retire from telling stories just because that's what's in my brain. That's how it works. It just will keep churning these ideas out. But yeah, just keep writing. Don't give up. Don't let those rejection notices scare you off, because if somebody even actually bothers to have the courtesy to send you a rejection notice rather than just ghosting you, you're coming out ahead of the pack as far as that goes. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of rejections before you get a yes. And that's what's great about the world of self-publishing now. Anyone can get their voice heard. The downside to that is you don't get an editor. So, you know, things that will be streamlined in the publishing process with an editor giving you suggestions and things, that's missing. So just have confidence in your voice, check your punctuation, and good luck.
Proofread, by all means, proofread.
Yes, proofread, yes.
No, you're right. Like a quote unquote rejection in the form of a communication is great. Years ago, a screenplay I shopped around at a certain production company out in Hollywood. And this one production company wrote me a letter back, and they were like, it basically trashed it. You know, it was like, no, don't do this. This is too juvenile, yada, yada, yada. I still have it framed. And I look at it and I'm like, they got back to me. You know, this is fantastic. They cared enough to give a shit to give me some criticism.
The ones that will give you notes are awesome. Even if sometimes their notes are a little assholey, they can still be helpful.
Yeah, because when you, like you say, when you languish in the lapse of response, I recently submitted a drabble to the George A. Romero Foundation for they're doing a podcast series, like old time radio stuff called The Dead, and they had a wide submission for anybody. And I wrote what I thought was a fantastic story, and it's been months I haven't heard a word, and I just want to write them like, just tell me something, get back to me, what the hell's going on, you know? So, speaking of screenplays, you obviously have a deep love for cinema. Have you ever thought about writing screenplays, or have you, and I'm not aware of it?
I have. In fact, I have written a couple. One never really quite got finished. One, a buddy of mine and I did an adaptation of H.P. Lovecraft's The Hound. We had sent it to a film company that was at the time up and coming, and I don't know if anything ever happened with them or not because it was like 15 years ago. Sent it to a film company in Australia that was looking to start up and looking for scripts, and we actually got some notes back on it, and then just for one reason or another, the whole thing kind of fell apart. But yeah, I'd love to get back to screenwriting. The thing that stands in my way is laziness. I can't stand formatting that kind of thing myself in like a Microsoft document, and the software that formats it for you is expensive. So I've kind of fallen out of it. But yeah, that's something I would definitely love to get back to, because I've got quite a few ideas that would be good as screenplays rather than stories. I might
have something for you. We'll talk after the show.
Okay.
Mum's the word. On top of that, I noticed that you, as if you're not busy enough, you find time, or I think you did, because the last date I saw was 2020, but for Cinema Socialist Apocalypse blogspot.com. What's that all about?
Cinemasochist Apocalypse. Yeah, that I haven't touched that, and it's probably dead at this point. I don't know if I'll ever come back to it. That was iteration number, I don't know how many of my friends and I have been writing movie reviews online since we were 17, I think, junior, senior year of high school, discovering at the time what was known as the B-Masters Cabal. I think they still, a few of them are still functioning, which were like the old heads of online movie review websites long before there was such a thing as Harry Knowles or what are the guys on Red Letter Media. You know, these were the Bad Movie Report, 1,000 Misspent Hours, which is still going. That's my friend El Santo. His writing is what mine wants to be when it grows up. I've been saying that for years. His movie reviews are phenomenal. But so we were inspired. Oh, anyone can just, again, back to the self-publishing. Anybody can just write about movies on the internet? Okay. And of course, it starts out a bunch of snarky teenagers wanting to sound like Mystery Science Theater, and in the process, completely failing to understand that Mystery Science Theater works best when it punches up, not down, and just, shitting on bad movies. In air quotes there. But, as you mature as a writer, it's like, well, this is kind of boring just making all these dumb jokes. Let's learn something and pass that knowledge on to the reader. So I got a lot more interested in the behind the scenes stories, trying to find interviews, trying to find anecdotes from the set, production information, that kind of thing. That, I guess, is path that led me to be writing for Scream today, because that's how I look at my writing for them, as wanting it to be informative. So I'll dig through, newspapers.com and archive.org and find old magazines, old newspapers, interviews with stars. Because I think I kind of got plugged as the old movies guy at Scream, because I think the most recent movie I was ever assigned to write about for them is like 30 some years old at this point. But yeah, most of the stuff I've written about for them is like classic Universal monsters and stuff from the 40s. Yeah, but anyway, I kind of gave up on cinema. Sorry, I forgot what we even started talking about there. Such a rambling answer. But yeah, I haven't touched Cinemasochist because writing for Scream kind of ate up the time that I had to write those types of articles for myself. I still have a few ideas. If I can't shop them around to other magazines, I might post there at some point. But yeah, I think that's iteration of my writing is past its expiration date at this point.
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with being pegged as the old movie man or whatever, just because in today's day and age, something comes out. And of course, now we have the internet, this useful tool that we have, the internet. And so just everybody can instantly know about it. But there is just a labyrinth of films from, like you said, the 40s up through probably the 90s when the internet exploded that a lot of people just don't even know about. You really got to scratch below the surface. And without curators like yourself, they're just going to die. So it's cool that you are pegged that and can bring stuff like that to light.
Yeah, well, I'm just kind of an omnivore when it comes to horror. I don't only like slashers or monsters or exploitation, because growing up, my parents are fairly conservative and didn't let me watch R-rated movies as a kid, but they remembered watching, Lon Chaney and the Wolfman when they were kids. So like, oh, clearly this is safe. This is okay. And that also is where a lot of the love of Godzilla comes from. Because like, oh, he wants to watch monsters. We can't watch aliens, but this is just a dinosaur. This is fine. So I grew up feeding my desire for scary things and foggy graveyards and creatures that go bump in the night with all of these classic movies. And then as I got older and was able to get a hold of the other stuff for myself, got into that. And so, yeah, I love all of it.
Which leads us, again, here in a little bit, to rapey French pirates. But we'll get to that again in a second. Just to assure you, when the blog spot's still running. Again, when I was doing some research on you for this interview, I found it on your Facebook page, a link to your Facebook page. And like I say, I think the last thing was from 2020, if I remember right. But then on the right-hand side, it looked like a current ongoing list of, like you say, like just people chiming in with movie reviews and stuff, I believe.
Yeah, the link tree is still there. The blog is still active. I haven't deleted it or anything. It's not getting updated anymore. I don't like to, unless there's something just horrifically embarrassing on there that I've forgotten about, which there probably is. I don't necessarily feel the need to wipe it away from history. You know what I mean? It's not like I'm embarrassed by it or anything. It's a piece of my writing history. It's a piece of my growth. You can see development from the oldest posts to the more recent ones, some sort of evolution or improvement. So yeah, it's an artifact, I guess.
You brought up Godzilla again, and I want to get to that. So I know you're a fan of cryptids, but the word on the street is that you are a quote unquote Godzilla expert, and that you've been a part of panels at G-Fest in Chicago.
Okay, I don't know who's calling me an expert, but they need to stop, because I'm not. It wasn't me, I promise. I don't call myself an expert in anything. Yeah, I did one panel at G-Fest, and it was kind of a disaster. Because it was 4 people on the panel, and it was about horror and kaiju film. That was what it was supposed to be. And so each of the panelists was supposed to pick 2 or 3 movies, do a little presentation, a little write-up on them, and only 2 of the 4 panelists actually did the homework. So about halfway through the panel, it fell off a cliff. So anyone who was there watching is certainly not going to call me an expert. But I do love me some Godzilla, yeah.
Let's go with aficionado. How's that? Is that better?
That works. I like aficionado. Yeah, that's definitely true.
Showing my ignorance about Godzilla and that whole world and about G-Fest. So when you're at those conventions, is there a language barrier, that exists between having an event like that in the States
The panels, aside from the interview panels for whatever celebrity guests they get to come from Japan, it's just mostly attendees from the U.S. There might be a few people who fly in from other places for it, but no, the panel is very much like any horror, or the convention is very much like any horror convention you go to, like a Crypticon or something like that, where there's a huge vendor room full of the most obscenely expensive collectibles known to man. And most of the panels are done by convention goers who pitch the panel, like me. You know, I'm not involved with G-Fest in any way. It was just me and this other fella, not people who are necessarily associated with the convention or part of the staff or anything like that. Like the panel I was on, just myself and a friend pitched it, and then got these other two guys on board. Show up with your visual aids and your notes and go from there. But they usually have an interpreter who can talk with the Japanese guests and do their interview panels. And then if anything, the language barrier is actually kind of an advantage when it comes to the autograph lines, because you can't stop and have a long, awkward conversation with your favorite celebrity most of the time. Sometimes you can. But for the most part, it's just you get your thing signed, you smile, you take a photo, and you move on. And it saves people like me with some social anxiety from having to try to come up with something clever to say to this person that you are a big fan of. You can just walk up and say, "Hi, here's my thing to sign," and be done with it.
That makes sense. I never thought about an interpreter, but I was going to say, I know Days of the Dead does a Godzilla-specific convention. I think it's Chicago. And yeah, I always see just everybody smiling and tons of pictures. And I'm like, I wonder if they can even understand each other. But now I get it.
Yeah, the All Monsters Attack is the Days of the Dead one. They started it last year in Indianapolis, and then I think they're very much trying to muscle in on G-Fest's territory, because when they moved it to, not only did they move it to Chicago, where G-Fest has been for the last 2 decades or something like that, they moved it into G-Fest's old hotel and had it just a couple of months before G-Fest, which is coming up in just a couple of weeks now. So yeah, they're definitely trying to muscle in on that. But I think most of the old heads are still at G-Fest as far as the panels and the informative aspect of it. From my understanding, All Monsters Attack is still basically just an autograph show. They don't have much in the way of informational panels. It's just toys and signatures.
Throughout this interview so far, we obviously have gotten to know that you are a diverse writer. You are the old man movie guy. You are not a Godzilla expert, but an aficionado. I got one last question, and that is, with your love for Godzilla and cryptids and your passion for writing, are they ever going to meld? Are you ever going to write something in that vein?
For Godzilla, it would have to just be unpaid fan fiction, because Toho is very litigious about people doing things with their IP that are not licensed. So if by some miracle someday a licensor of Godzilla literature, like IDW Comics, for example, says, "Hey, this guy should write something for us," probably I won't ever write a Godzilla story. Cryptids, on the other hand, yes, I've been very much wanting to do a story about the Van Meter Visitor, which is Iowa's own homegrown cryptid from a little town down by Des Moines. There was a sort of alien pterodactyl-like thing. Excuse me, it bothers me when people say pterodactyl, because that's not an actual pterosaur, and then I just said it. Pterodactylus is a thing. Now I'm getting pedantic about dinosaurs. I apologize. Anyway, an alien pteranodon came out of a mine shaft and terrorized the small town of Van Meter back in the late 1800s for about a week and then disappeared. And they have a little festival for the monster every year in Van Meter. And as the most perfect small town Iowa thing, we went to the festival a couple of years ago and pulled up, and there's a little 4-way intersection that's like the middle of the whole town. And there was somebody standing in the middle of the intersection with a sign and some balloons. And as we pull up to the stop sign, she comes up to the door and we roll the window down and she goes, "Are you here for the football game, the baby shower, or the monster?"
All three.
Just that's something that's kind of percolating in the back of my head. I'm a very slow writer. I don't tend to have an idea and then sit down and bang out the whole story in the afternoon. It's something where I'll have an idea and then it will just sort of fester in the back of my brain for months or sometimes even years before I get it put down on paper. But very long answer to a very simple question of yes, at some point I will write a cryptid story. Or would like to, anyway.
We look forward to it. And speaking of ideas, we are going to, in just a moment, discuss the idea that spawned this movie that we watched. But before we do that, we learned that Bryan Clark is, again, an aficionado of Godzilla. And, someone else who is full of aficionados, our podcast network, the PFPN. So let's hear from them.
You're listening to the Prescribed Films Podcast Network, home to hundreds of hours of free podcast entertainment. The shows on this network all have a common goal, providing you with the best discussions about movies and other forms of entertainment media. The PFPN hopes to fill your earholes with audio joy. Visit our website with links to all the other amazing shows at www.thepfpn.com. Thanks for listening.
Now that we've heard from our podcast network, let's get to the movie. I forgot what year this was because there were so many boobies and rapes going on that's all I paid attention to.
1974, but all I have to say is this. Bryan Clark, why the fuck could you not just pick a Godzilla movie?
When I messaged Brian the other day when I was rewatching for me the movie, saying I can't wait to hear how much the other guys hate it. Not that I want them to, but just nobody ever seems to love Jean Rollins movies the way I do. And just once, I want to introduce somebody to his movies and just have them fall in love with them because I think they're so good. But, oh, okay.
I was happy that this film was suggested because it turned me on to the Kino Cult app on Roku, which I didn't know existed. And I'm browsing through the library of films and I'm like, okay, there looks like some interesting things here that I haven't been exposed to that I'll check out. So that part was really cool.
Yeah, the Kino Cult's a fantastic app. They've got all kinds of great exploitation movies from the 60s, 70s, 80s. They have other stuff too, but it's a great resource for people like me who love Euro smut movies. Not that I would necessarily categorize Rollins movies as that, or at least not this one, despite the amount of boobies and rape, like you said. But no, I was trying to decide what to pick when Brian asked me to come on the show. I was like, do I want to do something Japanese? Do I want to do something really hardcore and nasty? Do I want to torture them? And then I thought, well, I'll hedge my bets and show them something I love on the chance that they'll love it too. But then if it fails, I'll have also tortured them. So that's a win-win, I guess.
So when I first heard that this was subtitled, I was like, oh shit, here we go. I don't like reading much. So I was like, okay. So I got into it and I was pleasantly surprised that there was a lot of long extended scenes with not much dialogue in it. So I was like, okay, I don't have to read so much. And I honestly didn't read every little part about it, so I'm still kind of confused on the story, but I think I got the gist of it.
No, I'm right there with you, Jason. I was apprehensive to watch it because of the subtitles. I'm not a fan of subtitles because I like to immerse myself, close myself off, immerse myself into the film, and pay attention to the subtleties. And for me, subtitles take me away from being able to watch the things and hear the things in the background because I'm focused on trying to read. But no, I was happy that the dialogue was limited.
Have we said what the movie is yet?
No.
I don't think it's...
Yeah.
We're afraid to. This is a great lead-in to the title.
Yes.
Les Demoniacus?
Demoniacs.
Demoniacs. Okay. Yeah. What you said.
Yeah, I was trying to look it up with my Alexa on the remote, and I couldn't pronounce it. I was like, it's like maniacs, but demoniacs. Okay, now that you said it, I'm like, oh, okay, it makes sense. But I wish it would record what I said last night because I was saying all sorts of weird shit, and it kept popping up with Johnny Depp movies. I was like, what the hell is it? I don't know what it's picking up. So I had to go back to the old typing it in and searching the Kino app.
No, that's funny because when I first typed it in, for whatever reason, I must have hit the wrong key and Animaniacs came up. And I'm like, I know this isn't it. You guys remember Animaniacs from when we were younger? The definition for Brian pronounced it better than I'm going to screw it up again. But demoniacs. If you look up the definition, it is just possessed people.
Yeah, there are a lot of subtleties to be immersed by in Roland's movies. Visually, they're always very striking. Works of art, really. I know that saying things like, "Oh, it's dreamlike," and it's like a painting come to life, are such cliched things, but they're so true about Roland's movies, and that's largely because he was inspired by a lot of painters rather than filmmakers to start out with in his young life. His mother was a model for painters and photographers, and so he was always surrounded by that kind of creative energy. His father left very early on, and she had affairs with many thinkers and artists, a lot of surrealists, including Georges Bataille, whose work, The Story of the Eye, Roland was actually trying to get made into a movie right before he died. He remembers Bataille reading him satirical anti-church stories as bedtime stories when he was a very young child. So that might tell you something about some of the imagery you see in his movies.
Well, and I think I also read that he grew up in a seaside town, if I remember correctly, which was kind of what led him to want to do this pirate-type movie.
Yeah, and there's a particular beach that he visited often as a child that shows up in many of his movies. It's a very sort of haunted looking place, I guess. It's a stone beach with these huge wooden pylons that used to be some sort of jetty or something, extending hundreds of feet out into the water, and it's just it's kind of an otherworldly looking place. It has a strange vibe to it that really fits with his movies, with all these morose looking French people wandering into the ocean to die or become vampires or what have you, or be attacked by pirates. That's a different stretch of beach than the one that's used in this movie with all the shipwrecks. But
he definitely had an eye for natural locations. That was one thing I did enjoy about this film, especially kind of middle to the end of the film, which I guess we should kind of describe what's going on with the film. The two shipwrecked young girls who were raped by the wreckers, the bad pirates, escaped, and they kind of went into the countryside, and they got to this just the stone structures and everything were beautiful, and he framed those pretty well. So
that's something I love about European exploitation cinema, especially from this era, that over here, if you want to make a movie set in a historical period or in some ruins in the United States, you have to either build a set or do it all on green screen, God forbid. But in Europe, this stuff's just laying around. It's built-in production value. You can just go film in actual ruins, and your movie immediately has an air of authenticity that just cannot be recreated.
So yeah, Clint, you had said talk about the premise of the movie. To me, the basic premise was there's this group of wreckers. They're not pirates. They cause ships to crash into the shore. They trick them somehow with a light, like from a lighthouse. They're out and they hear that a ship is wrecked. They go to collect the treasure from the ship. Two young girls wander from the wreckage. They rape them. They beat them and leave them for dead. The girls survive. They wander and find a clown. That is weird. I was like, what the fuck's going on? And then they find a priest or just a guy that watches over a captive who happens to be Satan with one large ass eyebrow. While this is all going on, the town is, the wreckers are going to drink in town, and there's these ghosts. There's this feeling of them being haunted by these girls. The bar is really cool. The lady that runs, is it a bar? Is it a flop house?
Well, a little of both. In this time period, taverns and cat houses are pretty much the same thing, but with some really bizarre decorations.
Yeah.
Like an ape skeleton and
just kind of whatever they had laying around.
A bat tacked up to the wall.
So the lady that runs the house has a sixth sense, or she can see the future or parts of the future or something, and she kind of knows what they've done and that these girls are going to come back and get revenge. And a lot of nudity and rape and weird dancing and drinking and odd stuff on the walls ensues.
Well, and one part about it, I guess, is important to convey is that, this is 17th century, I believe. It's obviously in the past. That kind of sets the time period. Brian, Spooky Brian, I think that you laboring to kind of explain the story there kind of gets to one of my points is, again, I think the filmmaker was great at setting up shots and utilizing, some of the natural surroundings and everything. I don't feel, sorry, Bryan Clark, I don't feel that he was the best storyteller. because I think the story really gets muddled and contradicting and confusing. And the first thing I want to bring up about that is I wasn't a fan of the opening where you got the headshots of the main cast and this is the captain, he's a bad guy, and this is the vixen, she kills people. I mean, good storytelling doesn't have to do that. You can find that out on your own 10 minutes into the film.
This is really the only one of his movies that does that. I'm not sure what that was all about. Ron often shot a lot of ad-lib scenes from not super detailed scripts. The story was always kind of secondary to the mood for his movies. And that's if you thought that was bad in this one, watch The Iron Rose sometime. That's just a 90-minute long dream sequence, basically. But I think it's interesting that you said the girls survive, but that's always kind of a question in the movie. Did they survive that initial rape? Because in some instances, it seems like they certainly did. They're still physically alive at the end of the movie, until the end of the movie. But did the devil character they meet bring them back to life, or were they still corporeal when they got to him? Because shortly after they abandon their corpses on the beach, the captain goes back to the tavern to drink and begins seeing them all over the tavern. But is he really seeing their ghosts that have followed him to haunt him? Or is this just piece of visual language to show us his attack of conscience because he feels bad about what they did to these innocent girls, even though he's killed who knows how many people up to this point? Maybe none of them have been defenseless girls.
I took it as his subconscious manifesting. In fact, they even kind of alluded to that in the beginning, that part I didn't like, where they're like, he's the captain, he's the bad guy, he is haunted by his victims. And so I actually loved that sequence. Again, I thought it was kind of misleading because what I took from it was at that point I thought they were dead and their ghosts were torturing him. And then when I saw they were chasing them after that scene into the ship graveyard, I'm like, okay, they're still alive. So that was just his subconscious eating away. He knows he's a bad man.
But even then, there's one point or several different points actually, where villagers or the tavern owner say that there have been ghosts seen walking around town. But then you could also refer to a person as, a ghost of their former selves. So literal, is it figurative? But it's interesting that all of the villagers seem to know what is in those ruins. Like, they're aware that the devil is buried there because the madam, I think it is, says at one point, these ghosts are heading through town out to this other island. And if they get there and release what's there, then we're all in trouble. So it's this very strange. So all these villagers are living with a satanic time bomb in their backyard, like an unexploded landmine going, when is he going to come out? And then these girls are what unlocks it. And I don't know, do we want to get right into the relationship between the girls and the devil? He offers them a chance for revenge, but they have to sleep with him first. They have to let him out of the crypt and have sex with the devil. And remember when I mentioned my friend El Santo and his 1,000 misspent hours, that his writing is what mine wants to be when it grows up. His phrasing for this particular sequence is so great, that the girls gain power when the devil fucks his infernal might into them.
Wow.
It's always fun as a writer when you find a phrase that somebody else came up with that's like, God damn it, I wish I'd thought of that. And it's like, it makes you mad because it's so perfect.
I think kind of a good point that you're bringing up is maybe it depends on your mindset when you go into this film. I kind of looked at this very literally. So like when you just talked about, are they ghosts, when the other people from the tavern saw them, I assumed it was a drunken sailor who saw two pale girls because they were wearing like white sheet bedclothes, and just assumed they were ghosts because he was kind of a drunken wretch himself. But I think a good point you're bringing up, Brian, is do you go into this literally, or do you kind of have more of an open mind and try to figure out, the figurative stuff that he was trying to get at? I tell you one thing that was super literal is, speaking of the vixen, so there were 4 wreckers, 4 pirates. You had the captain, you had kind of the brute. In fact, I think it was his name, Brute. You kind of had the Where's Waldo kind of flow with the, go with the flow guy. And then you had the vixen. And I tell you what, I'm probably going to screw her name up too, but Joelle Carrier, she was absolutely stunning. And not just because she was nude most of the film. I mean, it didn't hurt, but she was just absolutely beautiful.
Yeah, that's something. Even if you don't like the movies themselves, you want to watch Jean Rollins movies just to see some of his starlets. But I think of these pirates as they're kind of like the gang, Krug's gang from Last House on the Left. If all three of the guys were Krug,
Yes.
and then the Sadie character Tina is like 10 times nastier than all three of them put together, because she is very much the captain is in charge, he's the bad guy, but no, Tina is the nasty one. None of those three pirate dudes are half as scary as she is. She is clearly the psycho of the bunch.
I love that you brought that up, Last House on the Left, because that movie popped into my brain several times as I was watching this film. And I thought this is like an early rendition of Last House on the Left, but as opposed to maybe a little more realistic and obviously not modern, it was a little more kind of fantasy. The rape scene in the beginning, when they first accost the girls from the shipwreck, that was actually a bit uncomfortable. Specifically between I call him the Where's Waldo goon. You know who I'm talking about, the Where's Waldo goon. He had the red hat on. Between him and the one ship.
Lebosco.
Yeah, that was uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's surprisingly brutal, and there's not a lot of brutality in most of Roland's movies. There are in a few later ones, like Grapes of Death and Living Dead Girl, have some pretty striking gore in them. But for the most part, he wasn't that interested in showing violence. And there's a lot of sex in his movies, obviously, a lot of nudity or at least attempts at eroticism, whether it turns you on or not is a different story. But yeah, he generally is lumped in with horror filmmakers, but I can't remember if it's Cinema Fantastique or Cinema du Fantastique. It's a way of referring to his movies that they're more fantasy, like you said. They're more eerie, gothic fairy tales than they are straight up horror, which then makes something like that rape scene more jarring and more upsetting, like you said, because it's not like you're sitting down to watch a Last House on the Left where you're expecting that and you're kind of in that mindset. Whereas Roland puts you in this kind of dreamy, ethereal state, and then to have a really hard-edged, realistic thing like that dropped in the middle of it just makes it that much more uncomfortable.
I wonder if one of the ways he achieved what you're talking about, again, this is the mechanics of just the physical interactions between the characters, not just the rape scenes, but even like when they were fighting or when they were just arguing. I thought the physical mechanics were really odd. And it was, so you talked about when the girls slept with the devil. Two girls are sleeping with the devil. So I wasn't expecting to watch porn. That's not what I was wanting to see. It was really awkward. And you're kind of thinking, okay, this is the devil sleeping with these two chicks so they can have revenge. He can have their power, or they can have his power. But he was like almost afraid to touch them in certain places. And it was almost like throughout the whole movie, I think that it would have benefited from having just a choreographer on set. But then again, Bryan Clark, you mentioned too that I kind of think his filmmaking style is, here's what we're going to do. Let's just see what happens.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of ad-libbing, not just of dialogue, but just letting the actors kind of perform the scene how they want. And that tends to show up as far as the sex scene seeming badly choreographed. That is not unique to this movie or even his movies in general, but like Jess Franco movies are like that. A lot of, again, I like the term Eurosmut, but it also feels like it gives kind of the wrong impression. Like, there's more to these movies than just being smutty. You think of Europe as the more sexually liberated place, right? Where movies like this from the States at the time, we always shy away from nudity and we always shy away from sex and put in more violence. And Europe is the opposite. They tend to shy away from the violence and put in more sex. But then you watch movies like this with lots of sex scenes in them, and they're all so stilted and awkward, and it makes you wonder, have any of these people ever actually had sex or seen another person naked in front of them? Like, the fuck is going on here? Yeah, I think it's just I don't know if it's a stylistic choice or what's going on there, but yeah, the sex in a lot of European sex movies that aren't actual porn looks very weird and unnatural.
Well, and it makes me wonder if it's just because I'm removed from that culture. But Brian, you mentioned before we were recording that we have a mutual friend in Brent Edgett. And we have Brent Edgett on a couple times, but a show we did a while back was about, we called it shock cinema. And we were talking about that, about how sex is more liberated in Europe than it is here in the States. I'm starting to wonder if it's not that sex is more liberated over there, just nudity is more liberated. Because, yeah, like you say, the erotica element in this film, it was almost vacant. And again, it was because, like you say, it was so awkward between the people.
Of course, then again, I don't think he intended for any of the nudity or sex in this movie to be erotic, to be arousing. I think if you found, because the only time the sex isn't rough and miserable and awful is when they're having sex with the devil. Actually, essentially, it's a rape revenge movie with no revenge, and the devil is like a secondary good guy.
Right. Well, that's something else that was weird that I want to get to in a sec. The interaction between the captain and the vixen. I can't remember her name, so I'll just call her the vixen. In the beginning there, where, they're obviously a couple. They shared a bedroom. There was a couple times between them where, again, I thought she was absolutely physically beautiful. But as I'm watching it, I'm just kind of like, this is awkward between these two. She's naked. I should be happy. And I'm like, what the hell's going on? So I noticed early on, and I think maybe you can answer this for me, but the director, it looked like the director and or the editor had a hard time editing themselves. The scenes a lot of times were really extended, whether it was like someone walking down the beach and then it just kind of went on and on and on and you're just waiting for it to end. Is that his style?
Yes, that is very common in all of his movies. And I think that is part of what adds to that dream quality that I was talking about before, where it just, sometimes the scene will just keep going to just immerse you in the scenery or mood of what's going on in that particular part of the film. It's like, I don't know if you ever listened to like a drone doom metal band like Sun or something like that, where it's just each riff lasts like an entire minute of the song. It's just kind of put you in this hypnotic state almost.
Brian, Jason, did you guys notice that after they chased the two girls into the shipwreck graveyard, they lit the one boat on fire to smoke them out? The vixen goes in after them because, like Bryan Clark says, she's just insane and wants to kill everybody. No fear. She just hops in. She gets burnt. And she has some pretty severe burns on her face. And then the captain is like rubbing them with his hand. And I'm like, what are you doing? That's got to hurt her. And she's just, that was almost like a more erotic sex scene than some of this. They're, and they're just rubbing each other's burns or whatever. And then, like, I'm assuming a day or two later, her burns were gone. They were just healed. No scars, no nothing. Look what happened.
When he was like, I'm going to give me your lantern, I'm going to throw it. And then he shoots it and it explodes. And I'm like, this motherfucker at the beginning shot at them girls, and it seemed like he didn't hit them. But now he can throw a fucking lantern 100 yards and hit it from there. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, I was like, no, that doesn't make sense. But I mean, it's fun. Yeah. I watched this with my son Jack, who's 16. I was like, what the hell? We'll watch this together. And it was more enjoyable that way than it was just, I feel like, you guys watching it yourself. I feel like this would be a movie that if you had 20 friends and you put this on, you'd have a fucking blast with it. But I could see by yourself it would be tedious. And
I think you're absolutely right with that. Yep.
No, I agree too. Although I wasn't going to watch this with my two daughters. It just wasn't.
No.
So what was Jack's reaction to it then?
At the end, he's like, I don't really know what happened.
Well, exactly. That's what you're supposed to be questioning through the whole thing.
Were they alive? Were they dead? And I was like, well, I don't know either. Like, the whole movie, I was making him uncomfortable. I was like, look at that lady. How do you get an actress and you say, okay, we're going to film this movie and you're going to be raped several times in the movie, and most of the movie you're going to run around with just one boob hanging out of your clothes, this torn loincloth. And she's like, okay, yeah, that sounds good. Oh, and you're going to sleep with the devil. He's got one eyebrow. Yeah, where do I sign up? There was that thing on the wall. There was like the lady, and her legs were open
with the vagina that was all big, and
I was like, Jack, what if that's the ketchup dispenser?
Oh.
He's like, you're so disgusting. And I was like, yeah, and brown mustard is dispensed out of the back.
There goes any female demographic we ever had. Gone. Oh, boy.
I should have drove to Galesburg last night and watched it with him.
Yeah. And he said, I've never seen so many people have sex on rocks. I bet they had to go to the chiropractor after this movie.
I did. I was excited to come on here this morning so I can kind of find out what the movie was about. I'm learning from you guys because I was so confused on a lot of them. Like when they're in the ruins, the twins or the two blonde girls are making the statues fall when they're getting attacked by Tina. The clown comes out of nowhere, the clown girl. I'm still super confused on the clown girl and the guy with the beard. I assume they went back and they gave the power to her or them to make them survive, which made them kind of mortal again. That's how they were able to die.
I just want to see the reactions of any of your listeners who aren't familiar with this movie or of Roland's movies in general, because he has a thing for clowns that comes back in a lot of movies, to where we're sitting here talking about pirates and the devil, and and rape scenes and all this stuff. And then every once in a while, someone will say, and then the clown shows up. And I just want to see the looks on people's faces of what the fuck are they talking about? Why is there a clown?
It was really jarring. And when I first saw the clown, I was like, okay, they just encountered Ronald McDonald out of nowhere for no reason. And I thought, this clown is the devil. This clown is the evil entity that lives in these ruins. That's what I thought based off the story that had been told to me so far up to that point. And then when I realized that the clown wasn't the devil, I'm like, what is the point of the clown? And then you get introduced to, I saw him written up somewhere as an exorcist. I viewed him as like a gatekeeper or a priest who was keeping the devil, this evil entity, locked up. But they all actually seem to be friends. And that's where I got really confused. Was the devil, who the town was afraid of, wound up being the sympathetic person who wanted to save the life of the clown and his captor. I got really confused at that point.
Yeah, I think the clown and the guy who looks like Jim Henson playing Rasputin are just like the caretakers. Like, I don't think they're guarding the devil. They seem to be hanging out and making sure he's okay, stuck in that ruin, because they talk to him, and like you said, they're clearly friends. So maybe they're there to keep the villagers from coming. And again, I think a lot of this stuff isn't meant to be terribly clear.
Yeah, because I wonder if the director was more of a, in real life, like anti-Christian or whatever, just because, again, the tone of the devil and the clown and the caretaker are almost like they are the heroes. They are the good guys in this film, and humanity is bad.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if Roland was necessarily, if he was a militant atheist or anything, but he definitely had, a different outlook on good and evil, and especially considering the church. Because like I said earlier, he grew up as a 5-year-old kid having this surrealist philosopher read him bedtime stories about priests turning into werewolves and eating children. So he definitely didn't think about the clergy in the way most people do.
Yeah, there was towards the end, especially all the statues they destroyed were religious statues, Mary and Jesus. And then when the girls lay down with the devil, right outside the window is a religious statue there. I don't know who it was, but there's a religious statue right there that's having to, in my view, watch as the devil turns these innocent girls to his side, or whatever you want to say.
No, I thought that was interesting too, and that's another reason why I thought maybe it was a statement from the director, because the scene where the statues were the two girls who were raped and literally, in my sense, survived and then slept with the devil. Now they have these powers to go get their revenge. They show up to the bar and they just stand there and stare at everybody and get stabbed and don't do anything. And I'm like, they let everybody leave. And I'm like, how is this revenge? But yeah, then they go back to the ruins. The vixen chases them there. And they just immediately out of nowhere throw their hands up like Frankenstein and start dropping all these religious porcelain statues on them. And the director made it a point to, like, I saw the statue of Mary get smashed in frame, centered like twice. And it was all this like destruction of the statue seemed to be the focal point of that scene. And then it was kind of, again, back to the awkwardness, is out of nowhere, the statue of Jesus lands on the vixen and she's struggling to get up from underneath the weight of it. And I'm like, you could tell that she was acting, that she was struggling to get out from underneath it. It was weird. How about the noose? I'll jump back. The noose in the captain and the vixen's bedroom, that was kind of kinky on the wall. It was almost like the director's sense of kink was kind of, I don't know, how about a noose? They like to choke each other, asphyxiation. But then she's trying to seduce the captain because he's all worked up and scared and worried. And she's like, hey, how about you just take your mind off it on me? And this is the cringiest scene in this whole fucking movie. He grabs this like stuffed seagull that's sitting on the nightstand or whatever, and he starts stroking it and looking at her, and he's getting into what she's doing. It was actually probably the most erotic scene of the whole movie. And just as he's about to like give in to his carnal lust, he like snaps the head off the stuffed pigeon and then goes back to his worried state. It was so bizarre.
Hey, this being a European movie from this time period, you'll just be glad he didn't do that to a live bird. That is one thing that doesn't really seep into Roland's movies, thankfully, is live animal violence. You'll get that every once in a while with a Jess Franco or something like that, or a Paul Naschy, but... We
get to the end of the movie. I don't know what's happening. At this point, I'm really confused. And then out of nowhere, a bunch of clergymen show up, which is, at least for Western philosophy, it's the opposite of the devil, but they seem to be in league with the devil, and they're all just watching the pirates, the wreckers, rape these two girls again. They tie them up to boards in the sea, I'm assuming, so the tide will come in and they'll drown. And then they rape them again. And then it gets, again, more bizarre because the vixen, there's an extended scene where she's masturbating, soft porn style. Again, none of this is graphic. It's very suggestive. And as she's masturbating, watching the pirates rape these girls again, there's like sound effects of like planes and explosions and all this stuff, which didn't fit into the time period, I thought. So again, I thought that was kind of jarring. And then, like I said, the clergy shows up to just watch from the hill.
Some of the noises that happen during that scene are just like grunts and animal growls, and that made sense to me. And just, okay, they're behaving like animals. But then, yeah, like you said, there's gunshots and explosions, and I don't know if maybe that's just meant to evoke images of violence and war in the viewer's mind. Yeah, some of them are, like you said, sort of anachronistic, and it doesn't make a lot of sense. I think the clergy showing up at the very end is a sort of statement of, the church is too little too late. Most of the time they didn't really have any bearing on the events. They just showed up, not even to mop up after, basically just to stand there and be ineffectual.
I'll accept that. I like that answer. Yeah.
It made the captain, kind of have a second thought about it too. It looked like he knew that they were out there. They were going to drown. They were tied up, and it looked like he was snapped out of it and he wanted to go help them, but it was kind of too late also. And I don't know if that was because of the presence of the clergy there.
The movie has kind of an interesting moral of the story, I guess, is about pacifism, and that revenge isn't, like I said before, it's a rape revenge movie with no revenge, where they get the power, the literal power of the devil to take down the people who have wronged them. And in the end, they can't bring themselves to use it. And the devil power came with a cutoff point. It's, this works until dawn tomorrow or whatever it was. And, after that, the power reverts to me. So you have 24 hours in which to take your revenge using all the powers of hell at your command. And other than tipping some statues over, they don't really use it. And at the very end there, when they could have taken out all of the pirates, they instead just let the powers lapse back to the devil. And even though it results in them getting attacked and raped and murdered again, evil ends up destroying itself anyway, through lack of through an attack of conscience, or what, like Paul, the kind of big galoot henchman, gets drunk out of this giant comedy liquor bottle. I don't know what the hell that thing was, but he drinks this enormous fishbowl flask looking thing full of booze, and then tries to smash the girls with it to exorcise them from his head, to chase these ghosts away, and winds up tripping and shattering the thing and cutting his own throat on it. And then the captain, after they kill the girls out on the boards, that shipwreck they tie them to out in the sea, winds up fondling Tina, thinking like, oh, he's getting all turned on by this. And then he chokes her to death and stabs Labasco, and then runs back out into the tide to try to rescue the girls, and winds up drowning himself. So in the end, they got their revenge without having to get their hands dirty, I guess.
They had to sacrifice themselves to get that. But I like what you say is evil is going to destroy itself anyway. Probably the most stunning image of the entire film for me came at the very end. And that is when, I keep calling her the vixen, but you guys are referring to her as Tina. That must have been her character name. Is when she's dead or dying, the tide has come in and she's floating amongst all the seaweed. But just for me, that the way that was composed, that shot was stunning. But also all I could think of is, my God, the chiggers that these poor actors must have endured.
Yes, because it's not just like the ocean coming in. This area of where they're shooting is like a marsh or something. So it's all full of this just gross looking seaweed and algae, and the water's all brown and horrible. So yeah, you kind of feel like, oh man, the infections they must have suffered. Like everyone just left the set and went home every night and took a ton of antibiotics, and just hoping they wouldn't gangrene from the water they were in.
What do you guys think about a rating for this film? I've been looking forward to this since we started. We can discuss the high points, the low points. What do you guys think? Everybody's afraid to go first.
I normally go first. I'll go first. I'm going to give it a 3 naked vagina murals on the wall in the brothel out of 10. I don't know. It was weird. Like Clint said, the good part is like Tina was stunning. Wasn't hard to look at. The rapey scenes were pretty bad. But I mean, I understand this whole interview has kind of made me appreciate Bryan Clark is taking it, the artsy way, where Bryan, Godzilla, and I are just kind of some dummies that are like strictly on the content in front of us, not looking into the deeper meaning of it. I understand it was, probably a work of love by the director, but it just wasn't for me. And I think 3 was being generous. That's where I'm at.
We'll save Bryan Clark for the end. That's the best for last. So,
Okay.
Spooky Bryan, what do you think?
Well, I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. I mean, it wasn't a bad movie. I've seen a lot worse movies than this. The acting was kind of weird. I did what parts of the story I could understand I enjoyed. Visually, it's stunning. The whole movie looks good. The camera works good. I kept coming across, is it Zombie Lake? That's one of his movies?
Well, yes and no. I'm glad you brought that up because Roland usually gets lumped in with like worst directors of all time. This guy's movies are crap, largely because people point out Zombie Lake. That was not a project of love, as you were saying, Jason. For him, that was a thing for hire. Actually, Jess Franco was originally supposed to direct that. And the producers were such cheapskates that Jess fucking Franco was like, you know what, this is too shoddy of a thing for me to make, which I don't know if you guys are real familiar with Jess Franco or not. Dude made 200 movies or something in his lifetime, was not averse to low budgets. So a movie being too cheap and crappy for Jess Franco to be like, fuck this, I'm out. That tells you something about it. But Roland loved to make movies, and he was offered the here, Franco fucked off, you want to make this movie? He's like, yeah, I'll make it, because it's making a movie. So he did it for the love of making movies, but that was not a project that he himself was guiding through the whole thing. It wasn't his script, it wasn't his actors, it wasn't, whatever. He was just a hired gun on that movie. So for all of you listening out there, don't blame Zombie Lake on Jean Roland. Watch some of his actual, movies from the heart to get a good idea of the kind of filmmaker he is.
This movie did point me in the direction of there's other movies he's made that look interesting that I want to watch. I will watch more of his films. This movie didn't scare me away from watching any of his other films. And there's directors I've watched a movie and I'm like, I don't know that I could ever watch another movie by this guy, because you're a big Joe Bob fan. I'm a big Joe Bob fan. And he says a lot, you can do anything, but don't be boring. And the movie there was times that I was like, okay, you've been raping this girl for 5 minutes. Can we move on to the next point of the story? I wasn't bored, and I could watch another one of his movies with a crowd and I'm sure it would be a blast. It's something like I would go to Tad Good's birthday party and see, and I'd be like, oh, that was a fucking blast. So yeah, 5 unibrows out of 10. So is that if there's 2 brows, but they're connected, yeah, it's still 5. Yeah.
He's like 1 divided by 4, carry the 2.
Just thinking my math makes about as much sense as my understanding of this movie. So yeah.
You're talking about a group viewing like with Tad and them, and it reminds me of what I've been saying the past few episodes. As the days and weeks go on, you bastards just get sicker and sicker. Hey, gang, let's all get together and watch these women get raped. Yay, where's my mug of beer? No, it's funny, Bryan Clark, you said that the director has been described as, a terrible director and whatnot. I forget the exact word you use, or like the worst director ever, but I didn't come across that. But the word boring actually kept coming up in my research. A lot of people were accusing him of being one of the most boring filmmakers ever. I'm actually glad we had this conversation because my appreciation of this film has increased slightly.
I'll take it.
No, and I'm serious. This is what I first wrote, is that nothing about this film was successful. The story or the lack thereof was confusing. It contradicted itself. I feel it was poorly told. Everything from the pacing to the editing to some of the odd stuff that we had already discussed, I'm not going to repeat, to the lack of eroticism, to why the hell was some chick a clown. It was all completely lost on me, and I gave it 1 out of 10 stuffed pigeon strokings. But I'm glad we had this conversation. I'm actually glad that you recommended this film because I have a little bit better appreciation for it now. I just think it was, what's the word I'm looking for? It wasn't meant to be taken literally, but I feel that that's how he presented it. So if it was presented as more of conceptual film or more of an artsy film, I'm like, okay, I get why all this weird stuff's happening. They're metaphors. It's a reason. I could have got into it a little bit better. And I think maybe that's what he's trying to accomplish, but it was told in this very literal format. So now having a better understanding of the movie, I am going to up it. I'm going to go with Jason. I'm going to give it 3 out of 10 pigeon strokings because, I mean, you rip the head off the one and you still want to keep going. You need a couple more. So I'm going 3 out of 10 stuffed pigeon strokings.
Well, hey, that's pretty good. If our conversation today increased the movie's worth in your eyes by 2 whole pigeons, I'll take it. Now, this is not my favorite of his movies, nor do I think it's necessarily best.
Now you tell us.
And maybe I should have picked one like Grapes of Death or Living Dead Girl, which are a little more literal in their storytelling and have more gore and things. But I feel like I love those movies, but I don't think they're quite as representative of his overall work because, like I said earlier, for the most part, he tends to shy away from a lot of the gore. He put that into a few later movies to make producers happy. You know, we'll sell more tickets. The American movies are getting more and more graphic, and we have to keep up, kind of a thing. He's mostly known as the sexy French vampire guy because his first movie was a vampire movie that, through some machinations of, there was a series of riots and this big social movement going on in France at the time, which resulted in shutting down parts of cities and distribution channels falling apart. And so his first movie, The Rape of the Vampire, was one of only 2 movies available to be seen in all of France for like a couple of weeks. So by default, it made a shit pile of money. And then after that, his producer was like, okay, you're the vampire guy, make another one. So this was one of the first movies he got to make away from the vampire mold. So I wanted to pick something that was kind of a standalone. It wasn't part of the vampire thing, but still fairly representative of his sort of atmospheric, ethereal. You were saying a lot of people refer to him as one of the most boring directors. And I mean, I get that. I really dig a movie that's just all vibe and atmosphere. So that's why I love his movies so much. But like I said, this isn't his best. It's not my favorite. I just wanted to pick something that felt representative of what he could do that wasn't just vampire cinema. So I will give this one 6.5. No, let's go 7. I'll give this movie 7 decapitated pigeons out of 10. But yeah, I'm glad to say that you guys said you wanted to watch more of his stuff. Please do check out some more of it. Lips of Blood is fantastic. Living Dead Girl is great. There's so many excellent movies in his catalog. And maybe someday, over time, you'll Stockholm Syndrome yourself into becoming a fan like I am.
Well, I think it's cool because it sounds like Bryan and Jason are going to get together with Tad and a group of people, drink beer, and watch this movie. Bryan Clark, it sounds like you and I are going to get together and just rip the heads off of pigeons. So, hey, let's do it. Why not
both?
Hey, exactly. That's the foreplay? I don't know. Anyway, Bryan Clark, we appreciate you being on the show. We're glad that we got to know a little bit more about you. Even though we didn't really rate this movie super high, at least Jason and I did. And I am glad that I was exposed to something else. Again, I'm super glad because it exposed me to the Kino Cult app, which I intend on exploring. So thank you for that. Everybody, make sure you check out Putting the Ground to Sleep and Other Weird Tales, Bryan Clark's book. Make sure you check out Scream Magazine. You can subscribe to them or just grab one off the shelf at your local comic shop, I'm assuming. But Bryan, is there anything that you'd like to add, or ways that people can connect with you and see, follow up and see what you got going on?
You can find me on Facebook. That's about the only social media I do. But I have an author page on Amazon, so whenever I get another thing out, include it there. As far as Scream, yeah, you can get them at Barnes and Noble. Probably have to ask your local comic shop. I don't know if it's something they'd necessarily just always carry, but I know Bryan has requested it from his local shop, and they've started carrying it. So yeah, tell your local shop to carry Scream. Support local stores for sure. Check out Coagulate, the 2022 rehearsal demo. That's the one that I've got voiceover work on. And there's an upcoming band called Adversion, which I also have some voiceover narration bits on their EP that should be out later this year. And yeah, I think that's about all I've got going for right now.
That's way more than what we probably have going on in a little bit when we talk about what we going on, and we're all going to go, I don't know. Bryan Clark, pronounce the name of this movie.
The Demoniacs.
Yes, thank you. Was made in 1974, was set in, I'm assuming, the 17th century. And so that kind of goes along with horror history. So now that we've talked about an older film, let's get into some horror history.
A date which will live in infamy.
So on this day, July 12th, in 1882, Todd Browning producer, director, writer. He was a writer, director, producer for London After Midnight, Dracula, Freaks, The Devil Doll, and Mark of the Vampire. He was like one of the early directors of horror movies then. I was doing some research and people were like, he was the father of horror movies. And I know most of us know Freaks, that kind of ruined his career, but I didn't realize he had done all this other stuff. A lot of us know London After Midnight. I don't know if I've ever seen it, but I know the movie.
I wonder what it was like back in the days like that, like 1880s, because horror was probably frowned upon.
You would think so in like legitimate society. They were like, who is this heathen? Burn him at the stake.
Well, it was also different back then. Like, you didn't go see Phantom of the Opera with blood and guts and boobs and stuff dripping off the screen. It was more of a suspenseful horror. I don't know if you've seen the original Phantom of the Opera. There's like inclined scare than jump scare, and it's all shadowing, and people went apeshit when they pulled his mask off at the end. Now you see it and you're like, oh yeah.
That's one thing I like about when you look back into the history of any genre, but obviously we're talking about horror, is like you say, like back then it was like a Saturday morning cartoon now. But I remember my dad, he passed away in 2013. He was born in 55. And I remember him telling me, and he was like never afraid of anything. But he's like, yeah, when I was a kid, he would watch Outer Limits and the early Twilight Zones. He said, Clint, those scared the shit out of me. It's just amazing because you go back now and some of them are eerie, they're entertaining, but by today's standards, like, what the hell were you afraid of?
Well, like The Exorcist, now we watch that, and I mean, it still has some parts that you're like, oh, I can't. But back then, people were leaving the cinema, passing out, vomiting, and stuff like that. You go back and watch that for the first time. Wouldn't that be just a hell? If you had a time machine, people are like, I'd go back and bet on the Bears to win the Super Bowl in fucking '85, or some shit like that. And I'm like, I'd go back and watch Basket Case on 42nd Street, fucking New York. What? Like, oh, yeah, like I want to go back and see Jaws for the first time. And like we had talked about, was it Ghostbusters and Gremlins came out on the same day?
Mm-hmm.
You imagine going back and just be like, oh, I want to take it for Ghostbusters. And then you could go see Gremlins after that. Like how fucking fun that would be to do that kind of shit.
And then go to the video store on the way home and rent a fresh, just put on the shelf copy of Faces of Death. Oh, man. And the older I get, the sadder I get.
No one's going back in time to watch this movie, though. So released July 12th in 2002, Halloween Resurrection.
Oh, stop. That gets watched more than Demoniacs does.
Hey, Brian, did you know that it was Brad Lorre who played Michael Myers in Resurrection?
I think I heard that from somebody once.
Was it? Are you sure? I don't know.
So also released on that day in 2019 was Crawl. Can't remember. I think Jack and I did a double feature. Midsommar came out around the same time as Crawl. I want to say we did Crawl and then Midsommar. Or maybe it was Crawl and Hereditary. I don't fucking remember.
Well, it's no Ghostbusters and Gremlins.
Well, no. But they were both good.
They're both good movies. They are.
I still haven't seen Crawl. I've wanted to. I still haven't watched it.
Oh, yeah, it's good.
It's like Kingdom of the Spiders, but in Florida with alligators. So it's also like Jaws in Florida with alligators instead of spiders. It's one of those movies. July 14th in 1939, Sid Haig was born. Sid Haig, Spider Baby, Galaxy of Terror, The Devil's Rejects, House of a Thousand Corpses, Halloween, and High on the Hog.
And a whole bunch of 70s exploitation films, too.
I need to see Spider Baby. I've never seen that movie.
That's someone I wish I could have met.
Oh, for sure.
I met Sid once, 2014, 12, I can't remember, something like that, at Motor City Nightmares.
Yeah, I always heard he was a super nice guy. His autographs were always relatively cheap, like he didn't price anybody out autographs, even as he got older and got more famous.
He wasn't not a nice guy, but I think if I had boobs, he would have been nicer. That's just kind of the impression I got. Can't blame the guy. Hey.
July 14th, 1910, William Hanna was a director, producer, and writer of Hanna-Barbera Productions and created Scooby-Doo. And I'm talking about this in the fucking car with Tiffany, and she's like, well, that's not horror related. And I was like,
of course it is.
Yeah, I was like, how do you think most kids transition to horror movies? They fucking watch Scooby-Doo when they're growing up, and then they're like, I want to dig deeper into this. She's like, well, I like Scooby-Doo, and I don't like horror movies. And I was like, well, not everybody's fucking cool like me. Sorry about you.
Tiffany, no disrespect, but the show opens with a bunch of bats flying out of a haunted, decrepit mansion. And then Scooby-Doo, the title kind of like wafts up like a ghost. And if you like Scooby-Doo, but you don't like horror, that tells me that deep down, you really like horror.
She's just not ready to transition to being a cool person. I get it.
I have something to add to horror history today. Is that okay? So check this out. Nothing to do with the date, but on January 17th, 2007, Creepshow 3 was released. Why am I bringing this up? Because last night I sat down, because it's for free now on IMDb TV or from Freevee. Creepshow 3 was on there. Never seen it. Always wanted to see it. I know everybody hates it. It's a Creepshow movie. I got to see it. But now I know why everybody shits on it. Holy gosh.
Not good.
No, it had some redeeming qualities, and I think it had some potential. It's a stretch to say that, but I will say this, that I dare say in its own right, it might be better than the movie that we covered. It might be better than Demoniacs.
It may be 3.5 dead pigeons.
Yeah, exactly.
So the last little bit of horror history, on July 17th in 1987, RoboCop and Jaws the Revenge were both released. That'd be another fun one to go back and do. Which one do you watch first?
RoboCop. Do you know which one you watch second? The second one is you watch RoboCop again.
And then when they kick you out of the theater, you go to a different theater and watch Jaws of Revenge.
Yeah, they're actually handing out tickets for free to go see Jaws of Revenge. Like, here, can you please fill this theater?
And then in 1950, PJ Souls was born. I heard she's in some movies. Devil's Rejects and Carrie, Uncle Sam, that Halloween 2010. I don't know if anybody's seen that. And then Halloween, there was like an original Halloween. Before like all these remakes that were really good, there was one way back.
I thought you were just going to name all the other ones and not like that one.
It was at the end of the list. It was after Carrie and Uncle Sam. That was like the highlights of her.
I just watched her about a week ago in Rock and Roll High School with Dick Miller and Mary Warnoff and the Ramones. And
then last little bit, in 1964, Heather Langenkamp was born. Nightmare on Elm Street, Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Wes Craven's New Nightmare.
She is, as we speak, finishing up day 3 at Astronomicon 6.5 here in Michigan, up in, are they in Livonia? I think they're in Livonia. Yeah. over by Detroit. Thought about going, but just didn't do it.
Is that the one Kevin Smith is at too?
Yeah, I think it's the main reason they did the 6.5 is because when they did 6 earlier this year, we had a blizzard here. Kevin wasn't able to make it in, and there was a handful of other guests. So to make it up, they kind of, maybe it isn't going on today. Maybe it was only a 2-day con. I can't remember. But yeah, they made it up to the fans and brought him and the other people who couldn't make it and additional people. Oh, cool story about that. Way off topic. So I don't know if you guys saw this, but Josh from our friend Josh from Bootleg as Fuck Toys, he was there. Did you see his post about he made the dick-shaped bullets for Tom Savini for Dusk Till Dawn, and then he made the Maniac NES game, and Tom Savini just came over to his table, and if I understood it correctly, just kind of showed up unannounced, looked at all the stuff, and just started signing them all, and said, "Here you go." Like, oh, how fucking cool is that?
Yeah, I talked to him the other day because he had posted some more cartridges, and I was like, "How much are those cartridges?" And he's like, $20. I was like, "Oh fuck, I know I'm gonna get the Joe Bob one in a flashback." But I was like, I might have to look at some of the other ones, see what he has.
Well, you'll probably want to get the Return of the Living Dead one that he had, too. That was the first one he came out with.
Damn it, Clint. You're spending all my money for me.
Buy 2. I'll spend more of your money for me. All your money will be like today in history.
It'll be gone.
History.
Yeah.
You got anything, Jason? I feel like I should just record something and we'll just play it every time it's my turn to talk.
So what do you got going on, Jason?
Let's see. Let me look at my calendar. Let's see. I work. Boring, work. And then I work. That's it. Nothing exciting going on.
Nobody invited you to anything?
Still not. No. I totally forgot about that. Nope. Everybody's like, nah, let's leave this loser alone.
I had a couple people get a hold of me and be like, Clint, I want to invite Jason, but should I? And then I was like, fuck no, he's not even going to show up. He says he's going to, but he's not going to. So I wouldn't bother wasting your time.
Pretty much it. That's
we love you.
I don't know.
I said, we love you. He said, I don't know. What do you got going on, Brian?
I don't think I really have anything either. I mean, we will just be packing up from that little show we're going to have earlier in the month, 4th of July. You know, everybody celebrates that. And then getting ready for our trip to Michigan. So we're going to go to Michigan. That'll, be like the week after this episode comes out. Going to let this episode out, and then I'm going to go to Michigan. Have a bunch of fun. Do the zoo, do the aquarium, go to the convention, hang out with Clint. Yeah, that'll be my big trip. And then the week after that's Flashback, Jason. We're finally getting close enough to Flashback through this month. Yeah, that'll be Flashback. Yeah.
I wanted to mention it because I'm uber excited for it, but I've talked about it a lot and save something for the next episode because I will actually have something going on.
So the Detroit Zoo, they just had a baby draft there. Maybe a couple weeks ago, I think my mom was telling me about it. And I was like, oh, that'll be perfect. I was like, by the time Brian comes up with Finley and Tiffany, they can go check that out. So
yeah, I'm not going to the zoo because they're going to go on Saturday. So I'll be hanging out with you at a different kind of zoo.
Yeah.
But we're going to do the aquarium, and then there's a Peppa Pig thing we're going to do. And then they're going to go to the zoo on Saturday. So Tiffany was like,
I'm sure they'll announce it. They'll be able to find out when they get there. But yeah, let her know that there is a newly born baby draft.
Tiffany's like, if either of Clint's girls are bored and they want to go to the zoo with us, they're more than welcome. I was like, well, I'll ask them. I don't know if they'll want to go. But
no, I appreciate the offer. I'll let them know. Chances are they're going to be wanting to be at the convention, especially Boots. She's kind of got the bug, and Hannah's she's 16 now and driving. Hers is a different type of zoo now also.
I bet that makes you proud that you could take Hannah to the shows and she's got like that itch and that bug like to sell and talk and take in all that horror stuff, just immerse herself in it.
With Boots it does. So like I say, Hannah's the older one, and she's kind of
I was about to say
she's kind of departed a little bit. But you know what? If at any point in our lives together, whether it's for a brief moment when they're 12, because Hannah and I used to connect over the haunted house, you know what I mean? And then that went away. Now she's getting older and exploring, going through changes and exploring life and finding her own self. If at any point I can share something I enjoy with them, like right now it is Boots. She loves the conventions. We love Creepshow comics and the same movies. So it's great to be able to share that part of my life with them, even if for a brief moment in time.
Yeah, I saw a quote the other day, and it was like really hit home as a parent. And somebody had asked a lady, what's the best part about being a parent? She's like, watching your children grow up. And she's like, what's the worst part about being a parent? Watching your children grow up, because they're going to age and they're going to leave. And I was like, man, that's deep.
No, because I look back at, stuff you post about Finley and everything, and I really miss that age with my girls just because everything was new. I mean, I remember going with Hannah down to the park behind Wesco, which I'll show you guys when you get here, gas station deli right by us. And, oh yeah, you guys have seen it. And
yeah, we went and got donuts.
They built that when Hannah was about Finley's age. So we would pack a lunch, go play at the park, and then we just sit there and watch them, the big bulldozers construct the building. And it was fun and fresh and new. And, you just can't do stuff like that anymore. So you got a great time. So back to horror stuff. I guess it is kind of horrible to be a parent, watch kids grow up because you're scared to death what's going to happen to them in this crazy ass world. Do you want to know what I got going on in this crazy ass world?
Way too much.
Kind of the same thing, like I said the last episode, this month of July is I've got off, meaning I don't have any shows to be at or whatever, but I am gearing up for Motor City Nightmares back to back with Flashback. So I'm going to be spending some time restocking, hopefully creating some new stuff to offer through inkmirrors.com, working with the Valentine Bluffs filmmakers for a few knockoff toys for their table offerings at some of the conventions they're going to be hitting here in the near future. Just some fun stuff for them to present to their fans. The one thing, this is crazy. I can't talk about it yet because nothing's official. You guys, Brian and Jason here, know what I'm talking about. But it's pretty big. The funny thing about it is it's very related to the last big news tease that I did for a while, and then it went away, so I just kind of quit talking about it. So I got something big in the works. I had an idea. It stuck with a few people. Things are in the works, and I hope I can give you some more details soon about meeting certain celebrities at a certain place while watching a certain movie, hopefully with certain celebrities, and ho, ho, ho. Merry Christmas. That's about what I got going on. Well, and then I guess on top of that, getting the house ready for the Godzillas to invade my home. Yep. I honestly thought, and this isn't a dig, I thought, I wonder if I should put up some of my collectibles. Finley's 4. a 4-year-old is a 4-year-old. I don't care who the 4-year-old is. I thought maybe I'm going to put some stuff up. And then I thought, you know what? No, I'm not going to be Will Ferrell in Legoland to be like, oh, you can't touch it. I broke out the crackle. I'm just trusting that you guys are like, no, Finley, don't pick up that $1,000 toy and throw it on the floor. So no, Finley, don't. No, Finley, don't throw your keys at the limited exclusive thing that's sitting out in the open, please. Thank you.
No, I won't give her any keys. Yeah.
Hi, Jason.
I'm gonna have to start checking my keys at the door. Like, here's my keys, Clint. Like it's
gonna fucking pat you down. Here's some rubber gloves.
Oh.
Yeah. Whoa, wait a minute. That didn't sound right.
On my way.
So now that we've heard from our sorry.
That visual stuck with you, huh?
If you want us to start a Patreon so you can watch Jason get patted down, shoot us a message.
That's top tier.
You watch one borderline erotic foreign French subtitled film, and now all of a sudden you want to get patted down.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, I'm the one who suggested that, right? Oh boy, help me.
Yes, Captain.
Jason's gonna be Tina.
Well, hey, man, she was beautiful.
Oh yeah, she was. Yeah.
All right, take us home, Brian.
I changed my mind. I don't want to go back in time to see Jaws. I want to go back in time to see Tina. Yeah. Changed my mind. So now that we've heard the news and why we're poor, heard from our guest, Bryan Clark, and that Demoniacs movie, What Are We Up To? History. Don't forget to check out the I Like It Spooky Horror podcast on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. Listen to the Spill the Guts segment of the show every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey guys, want to give a quick shout out again, thanking Bryan Clark for being on the show, talking to us about his Writing and Scream magazine. Make sure you pick up his book, watch French films because he likes them. Bye.
Hey, what's wrong with you, man? Show some fucking respect for the dead, will ya?